The discarded canvas. The email arrived on a stormy Thursday afternoon, nestled between a past-due rent notice and a rejection from yet another job application. Olivia Winters stared at the screen, her finger hovering over the delete button. The subject line read, "Reed Financial Partners Annual Gala," with a quiet brutality that made her stomach clench. "Delete it," she muttered to herself, tucking a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. Just delete it and move on. But she couldn't. Something compelled her to open the invitation from the company that once bore her name too, before Harrison had systematically erased every trace of her contribution. The invitation was sleek and digital, nothing like the handwritten notes she'd once insisted on sending to their earliest investors. Celebrating 5 years of unprecedented growth, it proclaimed, alongside a professional headshot of Harrison Reed, his trademark confident smile gleaming beneath cold blue eyes. Olivia closed her laptop with more force than necessary. The tiny apartment she now called home seemed to shrink around her, a far cry from the lakeside mansion she'd helped design. The walls were covered with financial charts and half-finished code, her continued work on the algorithm Harrison had stolen, the one that had made him a financial wunderkind in the eyes of Wall Street. "You knew he was a snake when you married him," came a voice from the doorway. Olivia's roommate, Danny, stood there with 2 mugs of tea, her practical nurse's scrubs a stark contrast to the chaos of papers surrounding Olivia. "I knew he was ambitious," Olivia corrected, accepting the steaming mug gratefully. "I just didn't know he'd destroy me to get what he wanted." 5 years ago, Olivia Winters had been a rising star at Morgan Stanley when she met Harrison Reed, a charming investment banker with dreams bigger than his portfolio. They'd fallen in love over discussions of market inefficiencies and behavioral economics. Her practical brilliance had complemented his showmanship perfectly. The algorithm had been her creation, a revolutionary approach to identifying undervalued companies based on overlooked environmental and social governance metrics. Harrison had been dazzled, not just by her beauty, but by the potential of her mind. Together, they'd left their respective firms to start Reed Winters Financial Partners. For 3 years, they'd built something remarkable. Olivia refined the algorithm while Harrison charmed investors and clients. Their marriage had seemed as solid as their business strategy, until Harrison decided he needed more. The memory of that final board meeting still burned like acid in her chest. Harrison presenting his upgraded algorithm to the board without her knowledge. The sidelong glances when she'd protested. The careful legal maneuvering that had pushed her out with a pittance while he retained everything they'd built together. "I heard their stock jumped again yesterday," Danny said cautiously. "Another 15%. Olivia nodded numbly. "The quarterly rebalancing still works on the basic framework, but without constant refinement, it'll start degrading within another year." A bitter smile crossed her face. "Harrison never understood the mathematics behind it. He just knew it made money." Her phone buzzed with a text from her latest client, a small nonprofit paying her a fraction of what she was worth to optimize their endowment investments. It wasn't enough to cover next month's rent. Nothing had been enough since Harrison had blackballed her throughout the financial industry, spreading rumors of instability and corporate espionage. "You should go," Danny said suddenly. "Go where? To another futile job interview where they'll just tell me I'm overqualified?" The words tasted bitter. "No," Danny nodded toward the laptop. "To the gala. Show Harrison you're not broken." Olivia laughed, the sound hollow and unconvincing. "I am broken, Danny. I'm 34, living with a roommate, and I can barely make rent. Meanwhile, he's running the company I conceptualized with my algorithm. Then go and remind yourself why you're fighting to rebuild. See the enemy up close." 3 days later, against her better judgment, Olivia found herself standing in the lobby of the Blackstone Hotel, wearing the only formal dress she hadn't sold, a simple black sheath that had once been relegated to her casual business events section of her closet. The ballroom was a cathedral to wealth and privilege, filled with the financial elite of Boston. Crystal chandeliers reflected off champagne flutes and diamond jewelry, creating a dizzying constellation of light. Olivia accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, using it more as a shield than a refreshment. Then she saw him. Harrison Reed stood in the center of the room, his tailored tuxedo fitting him like armor. Beside him was Bethany Sinclair, the willowy blonde VP of Client Relations, who had been his mistress for months before Olivia had been pushed out. Now she wore an engagement ring that caught the light with every animated gesture. "Olivia Winters," came a smooth, unfamiliar voice from beside her. "I thought that was you." She turned to find herself face to face with a tall man with intelligent eyes and a subtle, assessing gaze. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, and his bespoke suit spoke of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. "I'm sorry," she said cautiously. "Have we met?" "Not formally." He extended his hand. "Roman Blackwood." The name registered immediately. Roman Blackwood was a legend in tech investment circles, the founder of Blackwood Ventures, known for identifying revolutionary technologies before anyone else saw their potential. "What are you doing here?" she asked, then winced at her directness. His smile was slight but genuine. "Reconnaissance. Your ex-husband has been trying to secure a meeting with me for months." His gaze was direct, unnerving in its focus. "But I'm much more interested in talking to the actual genius behind the Reed algorithm." Olivia's champagne glass nearly slipped from her fingers. "You know, anyone with mathematical training who studies the pattern recognition in that algorithm can see it's not the work of a finance bro with a marketing degree from Wharton." He nodded toward Harrison. "I've reviewed your work from Morgan Stanley. The fingerprints are the same." "It doesn't matter now," she said quietly. "He owns it all." "He owns that version," Roman corrected. "But I suspect the creator has continued to refine her work." Before Olivia could respond, the crowd's attention shifted. Harrison had taken the stage, microphone in hand, his smile wide and practiced. "Welcome, friends and partners. Tonight we celebrate not just 5 years of Reed Financial, but the announcement of our expansion into Asian markets with our proprietary investment technology." Applause filled the room. Olivia's hands remained still at her sides. "Success requires making difficult choices," Harrison continued, his gaze sweeping the room before landing directly on Olivia. His smile tightened slightly. "Sometimes you have to separate yourself from those who would hold you back, who lack the vision to see what's possible." The targeted barb struck with precision. Around her, whispers started as people recognized the discarded wife. "Some people are stepping stones on the path to greatness," Harrison added, raising his glass. "To those who served their purpose, thank you for your sacrifice." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Olivia felt the room begin to spin, humiliation burning through her veins. "What an impressive display of insecurity," Roman commented quietly, just loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "Shall we give him something more substantial to worry about?" Before she could ask what he meant, Roman Blackwood had taken her, elbowed gently, and was guiding her directly toward the stage, parting the crowd with his reputation alone. Silent strategies. 3 years passed like a whispered secret. The corner office on the 38th floor of Blackwood Tower offered a panoramic view of Boston's financial district, including the gleaming headquarters of Reed Financial Partners. From her desk, Olivia could see the building where Harrison still played king, though his empire had begun to show cracks that only the most astute industry insiders had noticed. Their quarterly adjustments missed 3 key market shifts, Olivia observed, more to herself than to her visitor. "The algorithm is degrading faster than I anticipated." Roman Blackwood stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands clasped behind his back. At 52, he carried the quiet authority of someone who had learned that true power rarely needed to raise its voice. Reed's stock dropped 12% after their earnings call yesterday, he said. The board is getting nervous. Small, satisfied smile touched Olivia's lips before disappearing. 3 years ago, Harrison couldn't have anticipated that his greatest asset would become obsolete without its creator. The day after the gala, Roman had offered Olivia something beyond mere employment. He'd given her a partnership, the freedom, to rebuild her work from the ground up under Blackwood Ventures' protection, with resources that made her previous work seem primitive by comparison. Most importantly, he'd kept her involvement completely confidential, allowing her to work behind an elaborate corporate veil. The world knew only that Blackwood had developed revolutionary financial technology called Nexus, overseen by a mysterious chief architect known publicly by the pseudonym Cassandra. What they didn't know was that Cassandra was Olivia Winters, the woman Harrison Reed had discarded like yesterday's financial reports. The latest rumors suggest Reed Financial is looking for a buyer, Roman said, turning from the window. Harrison has apparently been meeting with investment banks to explore options. Olivia's fingers stilled over her keyboard. For 3 years, she'd rebuilt her life with methodical precision, developing Nexus into something far beyond what Harrison had stolen, establishing a new identity in the industry, and quietly waiting for the moment when the house of cards he'd built would begin to collapse. "He's running scared," she said quietly. "Without the ability to refine the algorithm, he's been patching it with increasingly desperate workarounds." Roman studied her with the same penetrating gaze that had seen her potential that night at the gala. "The question is, what do you want to do about it?" Their relationship had evolved beyond mentor and protege into a partnership built on mutual respect. Roman had taught her to navigate the sharper edges of corporate power, while she had opened his eyes to possibilities in financial technology he hadn't imagined. "I want Blackwood to acquire Reed Financial," Olivia said, the words emerging with the clarity of long consideration. "Not for their technology, ours is superior in every way, but for their client list, their regulatory approvals, and—" She allowed herself a rare moment of complete honesty. "For justice." "Justice is an expensive indulgence in business," Roman cautioned, though his expression suggested he wasn't opposed to the idea. "It's not just personal," Olivia insisted, rising from her desk to join him at the window. "Their client base would accelerate our expansion timeline by at least 18 months. And their regulatory framework in Asian markets would save us millions in compliance costs." Roman's slight smile acknowledged the skillful way she'd framed personal vendetta as sound business strategy. "And who would lead this acquisition?" "I would," she answered without hesitation. "Under the Cassandra identity, of course. Harrison doesn't need to know who's dismantling his company until the contracts are signed." 2 weeks later, Olivia sat across from Tessa Fujimoto, Blackwood's razor-sharp legal counsel, reviewing the preliminary acquisition proposal. The conference room hummed with quiet energy as their team prepared for the opening salvo. "Reed Financials. Board has agreed to preliminary discussions," Tessa confirmed, sliding a tablet toward Olivia. "They're desperate, but trying not to show it. Their technology division is hemorrhaging talent, and 3 major clients have reduced their investments under management." Olivia scanned the financial statements with a practiced eye. The deterioration was even worse than she'd anticipated. Harrison had been making increasingly risky bets to compensate for the algorithm's declining effectiveness. "He's operating from the same playbook he always has," she murmured. "When in doubt, double down and bluff." "The initial meeting is scheduled for tomorrow," Tessa continued. "You'll be introduced as Cassandra, chief architect of Nexus, and Roman's designated representative for the acquisition." Olivia nodded, a complex mixture of emotions churning beneath her composed exterior. For 3 years, she had been a ghost, visible only through the impact of her work. Tomorrow she would step into the light, still disguised, but close enough to see Harrison's face when he realized his company's fate rested in a stranger's hands. The Reed Financial boardroom hadn't changed much in 3 years. still all mahogany and masculine power designed to intimidate rather than welcome. Olivia entered with measured confidence, her designer suit a sleek armor, her hair now platinum blonde and cut in a severe bob that completely transformed her appearance. Harrison sat at the head of the table, flanked by his CFO and legal team. 3 years had added weight to his frame and lines to his face that even expensive skin care couldn't erase. The strain of keeping his company afloat had taken its toll. "Ms. Cassandra," he greeted with the forced charm she remembered so well. "We're honored that Blackwood Ventures sent their chief architect, though I must admit, we expected Roman himself." "Mr. Blackwood sends his regards," Olivia replied, her voice deliberately pitched slightly lower than her natural tone. "He believes this acquisition requires technical expertise rather than his personal attention." She caught the flash of irritation in Harrison's eyes, the familiar wounded ego when he wasn't deemed important enough. "Some things never changed. Let's be clear," Harrison said, leaning forward. "This isn't an acquisition. We're exploring a strategic partnership that would benefit both organizations." Olivia allowed herself a small smile as she opened her portfolio. "The financials suggest otherwise, Mr. Reed. Your algorithm is failing at an accelerating rate, your client retention has dropped 23% year over year, and your technology infrastructure is 3 generations behind current standards." The blood drained from Harrison's face as she laid out the precise weaknesses of his operation. Weaknesses only someone intimately familiar with the original algorithm would recognize. "How did you—" he began, then recovered. "Your information is incomplete." "On the contrary," Olivia countered, sliding a document across the table. "This is our offer. It's fair considering the circumstances and substantially more generous than the valuation Morgan Stanley provided to your board last week." Harrison's eyes widened slightly, confirmation that she'd hit the mark. The acquisition team he'd engaged had indeed valued the company far lower than Blackwood's offer. "You have 48 hours to accept," she continued, rising from her seat. "After that, we'll approach your competitors with a different proposition, one that would effectively render Reed Financial obsolete within 6 months." As she walked out of the boardroom, Olivia felt Harrison's gaze burning into her back. She recognized his confusion, the sense that he was missing something important, that this stranger somehow knew too much. For the next 2 weeks, negotiations proceeded with the relentless precision of a chess match. Harrison fought for control at every turn, but Olivia had anticipated each move, each counter-proposal. She had spent 3 years not just rebuilding the algorithm, but studying her opponent, with clinical detachment. "He's agreed to all major terms," Tessa reported during their final strategy session. "The only remaining point of contention is his role post-acquisition." "He wants to stay on?" Roman asked, eyebrows raised in surprise. Olivia wasn't surprised at all. Harrison's entire identity is wrapped up in being the financial genius behind Reed Partners. Without that, he's just another Wharton MBA with good hair and an expensive suit. "What do you want to do?" Roman asked, deferring to her judgment as he had throughout the process. Olivia considered the question carefully. "Let him believe there's a senior advisory position available, something with an impressive title but no actual authority. We'll clarify the details after closing." The signing ceremony was scheduled for a Friday afternoon in the same hotel where 3 years earlier Harrison had publicly humiliated her. Olivia had chosen the venue deliberately, a poetic symmetry that would be lost on everyone except her and soon Harrison. As she prepared in her office that morning, Roman appeared in her doorway. "Are you ready for this?" Olivia smoothed her jacket, checking her reflection in the window glass. The disguise was convincing, but not infallible. Today, Harrison would finally learn exactly who had engineered his downfall. "I've been ready for 3 years," she replied, picking up the final contract, the document that would transfer ownership of Reed Financial to Blackwood Ventures and place Olivia Winters in control of the company that still bore her ex-husband's name. Roman studied her with quiet consideration. Revenge is rarely as satisfying as people hope it will be. Olivia turned to face her mentor and partner. This isn't just about revenge, Roman. It's about restoration, taking back what was stolen, and building something better with it. He nodded once, acknowledging the distinction. Then let's go rewrite history. The Reckoning. The St. Regis Hotel ballroom had been transformed for the signing ceremony. Corporate banners displayed the Blackwood Ventures logo alongside Reed Financial's increasingly outdated branding. A table with the final contracts stood at the center, surrounded by lawyers, board members, and key executives from both companies. Harrison arrived 15 minutes late, a calculated power move that had once intimidated opponents, but now read as desperate. He strode in with forced confidence, Bethany at his side, her smile strained, and her engagement ring conspicuously absent. Olivia watched him scan the room, searching for Roman Blackwood. When his gaze finally settled on her, she stepped forward to meet him. "Mr. Reed," she greeted, extending her hand, "shall we proceed with the formalities?" "Where's Blackwood?" Harrison demanded, ignoring her outstretched hand. "I assumed he'd want to be present for his company's largest acquisition this year." "Mr. Blackwood sends his apologies," Olivia replied smoothly. "He's authorized me to finalize all details and sign on behalf of Blackwood Ventures." Harrison's jaw tightened. "I'd prefer to deal directly with the principal." "You are," Olivia stated. With deliberate movements, she reached up and removed the tinted glasses that had partially obscured her features. Then she unpinned her platinum blonde hair, allowing it to fall back into a more natural style. "I am the principal in this transaction, Harrison." For a moment, he simply stared, uncomprehending. Then recognition dawned in his eyes, followed by disbelief, and finally a cold, hard fury. "Olivia?" he whispered, her name sounding like a curse on his lips. "Surprised?" She smiled, not bothering to disguise her voice any longer. "You shouldn't be. You of all people should know I never leave a project unfinished." The blood drained from Harrison's face as the implications cascaded through his mind. "You're Cassandra, the architect behind Nexus?" "I am," she confirmed. "Turns out I wasn't just a stepping stone after all." Harrison glanced around desperately, suddenly aware of the audience witnessing his unraveling. "This is a conflict of interest," he hissed. "You can't—" "Actually, I can," Olivia interrupted. "My legal team has been quite thorough. There are no non-compete clauses that survived our divorce, and the settlement you so generously pushed through the courts gave me complete freedom to rebuild what you stole." She gestured toward the contract on the table. "Everything is in order. You have two choices, Harrison. Sign the papers and accept the generous compensation package, or walk away and watch as we systematically dismantle what's left of your company." Harrison's face contorted with rage. "You planned this from the beginning." "No," she corrected. "You planned this the day you decided I was disposable. I simply ensured there would be consequences." For a tense moment, they faced each other across 3 years of betrayal and determination. Then, with military precision, Tessa Fujimoto approached with the contracts. "Mr. Reed, your signature is required on pages 317 and 42, she stated, professionally, as if this were any ordinary business transaction. Harrison looked from Olivia to the contracts and back again. Desperation replaced anger in his eyes. "What about me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What happens to me after this?" Olivia considered him dispassionately. "That depends. Your technical knowledge of the original algorithm could be valuable in certain limited applications. We could potentially find a place for you." Hope flickered across his face. "As an advisor? Chief Strategy Officer? Junior Analyst," Olivia clarified. "Level 3, The same position you relegated me to before pushing me out completely. The symmetry wasn't lost on him. His shoulders sagged in defeat as he reached for the pen Tessa offered. As Harrison signed, away his company, Olivia felt not the rush of vindication she'd expected, but a quiet, profound sense of closure. She had rebuilt from ashes not just a career, but herself, stronger, wiser, and finally free from the shadow Harrison had cast. After the final signature, Harrison looked up at her with a mixture of resentment and reluctant respect. How did you do it? The Nexus algorithm is light years beyond what we developed together. That's the difference between us, Harrison, Olivia replied. You stopped at stealing. I never stopped creating. Later that evening, in the quietude of Blackwood Tower, Olivia stood by the windows looking out at the city lights. Roman joined, her offering a glass of champagne. To restoration, he toasted. And to building something new, she added, clinking her glass against his. Tomorrow, the business world would wake to the news that Olivia Winters had returned from professional exile as one of the most powerful figures in financial technology. The woman Harrison Reed had tried to erase had instead written herself into history on her own terms. What's next? Roman asked, sensing the shift in her energy. Olivia smiled, her gaze fixed on the horizon where dawn would eventually break. Everything